All right, welcome back. So we got another half of the course to go. So to begin with, why don't we take a look at the semester calendar just to see where we are. We're still following the schedule strictly, okay, just to make sure you can also plan ahead for the assessments coming. So we are now here on the 24th. We'll do lecture today on a new topic, and then on the 26th, which will be this Thursday. So during the class time, we're not going to meet in the lecture place. It's going to be in Williams Small Center. So please check the PDF guide for Programming Test 1 on the E-class. Double check, right? All the policy expectation has been outlined over there. So you also receive like a practice questions, assignment solution, etc. You got everything you need. Okay. But looking ahead, I will try to get a grading done for sure. I'm aware about the drop deadline. So that will be March 9th. I'll definitely give you the feedback and result for Programming Test 1 before the drop deadline. So if you have to make a critical decision, you are going to make it. And then your written test also is coming on the 19th of March, and also Programming Test 2, which we and that one they will be based on mainly assignment number 3. But doing assignment number 4 can help, but it's not really strictly required, but it can help. Okay. All right, that's pretty much the assessment that are coming. You know, as we kind of mentioned on day 1 of the semester, we don't have any assessment except for assignments before the reading week. But after the reading week, you definitely got to expect these 3 assessments coming. Okay, and for the exam, it has not been confirmed just yet by the registrar office. So let's wait a bit, right? So once it's announced, we can plan accordingly. Okay. And then let's see if I miss anything right here. Oh, makeup lecture. Okay, that one is actually important. Okay, let me just mention that as well. So since we're going to use the lecture time on the 26th for the programming test, so I already made available the makeup lecture. So there will be 3 in total, as we said earlier. So 1 for programming test 1, 1 for written test, and 1 for programming test 2. They have been ready. I'll definitely release them earlier if I can. So you definitely got enough time to really study them at your own pace, and then ask me questions, you know, during office hour, or approach me anytime. Okay. Let me show you how you can find them. The same place. For makeup lecture 1, if you go to the lecture site, you can already see makeup lecture right here, right? So that one there, you were going to study a bit about abstract data types and also stacks. So these are the topics that are relatively simpler. So we don't really need to kind of go over, you know, extensively in the class. So you will be able to study at your own pace independently. But again, if you got any trouble understanding the topics, since they will be covered in the later assessment, you can definitely reach out to me, no problem, right? But I just want to give you a heads up. The makeup lecture is already there. So please go ahead and study them and plan ahead. Okay. Okay, and then let's see here. All right. And then let's see, you got solution for assignment 1 and 2 and practice question, right? So on your test day, right? One thing that's actually, 2 things that are really important, right? Please make sure you got your photo ID, right? We're gonna check it, otherwise you cannot take the test, right? Just stand there, okay? And also bring your own sketch paper if needed. So we may not be able to provide like a spare paper to you, so please make sure you bring your own, but if your classmates are kind enough, they might give you one, but just make sure you bring your sketch paper. I think you might need it to sketch your solution before you code it up in Java. All right. Any questions? Please. All good? Okay, that's good. All right, let's now move into a new topic, right? It's not strictly relevant to Programming Test 1, but for sure it's going to be relevant to the upcoming 2 assessment, right? So let's now learn a new topic. I'm very excited because it's really a good topic to learn. Okay, so it's going to be about trees. Let me just first of all lay out about the topics that we're going to cover by the end of the semester. So you can think about in the coming 6 weeks, we're all going to cover about trees, right? There are many things to talk about, coding-wise and also theoretical concept as well, many things. So let me just first of all going over the topics you can expect to learn by the end of the course, okay? So the topics about trees. Okay, there will be 7 subtopics in total. Okay, and also you'll be given 3 sets of slides as we go. Okay, so today we're going to start talking about something called general trees. And then followed by that, we're going to talk about something called binary trees. It's more like a specialized kind, binary, either 1 or 2, basically. Okay? Binary trees. And the acronym will be BTs, right? You'll see that very often, too, in the notes. Excuse me. And the third one is going to be something called binary search trees. Okay? Binary search trees, which is another specialized kind for binary trees, which is adding more properties to be satisfied. And the common acronyms for that will be BSTs. Right? Makes sense. Excuse me again. And number 4, we're going to add another property, another layer to the binary search tree. It's called balanced binary search tree. Okay? It's called balanced binary search trees. All right? And then number 5, we're going to talk about a particular ADT. You'll learn about what ADT is in the makeup lecture. It's a very simple concept. We're going to learn about another ADT, abstract data type, called priority queues. And this one here is definitely more sophisticated than stacks and queue that you're going to learn in the makeup lecture. But this one here, we're going to discuss that thoroughly in the lecture, right? So there are many possible implementations for priority queue. We can definitely start with, let's say, array or singly linked list or doubly linked list, which is what we learned so far. However, the more common and efficient implementation is something called a heap. However, let me clarify first time. Right? I'm going to clarify maybe a few times, just make sure you don't get confused. Don't really confuse the heap we are talking about in 2101 with the heap you kind of learn from maybe 2031. You may learn about the heap being the permanent memory that's going to store maybe functions or maybe some global variable. It's not a heap we are talking about. The heap over here is a particular kind of tree that satisfies certain property. But what property should we satisfy? We're going to see. Right? At this point, it will be too advanced. Okay. Okay, number 7, we're going to talk about heap sort, which will be based on the heap data structure. So roughly speaking, these will be the 7 important topics we're going to cover by the end of the course. Of course, there might be some subtle, like a sub-topics we have to cover. Okay, roughly speaking, so these 2 will be lecture slide A that you have been already made available to. This one here will be B, and this one here will be C. All right? And from the names, when you also study for the final exam or written test later, think about binary here is some particular property. And also search is also some property. And also balanced is just another property. So you want to think about what these properties really mean mathematically. We'll do examples and also we'll see the mathematical equation. And the final one we're going to see will be the heap data structure. Right? So these are the critical terms you want to study right, later for the assessment. Okay. All right. So let's now go over some slides just to see the overall roadmap. So today can be a little bit light, but we really want to learn some fundamental concept about trees. Okay. All right. So that's lecture slide 6A. Okay. We're going to learn about, first of all, what's really the difference between linear data structure and nonlinear data structure? We're going to continue with this kind of distinction in 3101 as well. So it's really important for you to see. We'll go into that into detail after this. Okay. And also general tree versus binary tree. Right? We're going to see that. We won't see binary tree today, but very likely next Tuesday when we resume. And also important, so for your programming test number 2, and also assignment 2 and 3, we're going to see how you can implement trees in Java. Okay? And to really implement a tree in Java, you also have to somehow use the doubly linked list or singly linked list that we kind of did for assignment number 2. Okay? It's a very fun programming challenge for you to really try to tackle, right? That's why we really want to kind of push you for both the theoretical and practical aspects, for data structure. And then we're going to see binary tree. because it's more like a binary, either 1 or 2, there will be some very interesting mathematical properties we can actually observe and try to derive, especially log that you can learn in the previous math course, and also something called geometrical sequence sum. That's also something we learned earlier in the math course. But I'm going to review them, don't worry. I will introduce them as we need it. And we're going to look at tree traversal. Traversal basically just like I'm given a tree with, let's say, 100 nodes in there. How can I systematically visit every node in the tree? If you just want to do a traversal in the array, for example, you simply start from index 0, from left to right, go all the way to the number of nodes minus 1 index. Pretty straightforward. However, if you want to do for the trees, it's not as trivial. The way you do it usually is by recursion. That's something we're going to see as well. All right? Tree traversal. And of course, once you get to 3101, things will get even more interesting. So when you want to traverse, let's say, a graph, you can do it either iteratively or recursively, but the properties you can observe is even more sophisticated. That's something you can look forward to in a follow-up course. Okay? Traversal. All right? Let's talk about linear versus nonlinear, first of all. Right? So you guys can take a look at this slide here, slide number 3. That one just gives you some textual form about the distinction. But let's look at some visual. I think that always helps. All right? And guys, by the way, thank you so much for the feedback you wrote. I really appreciate the good things you say. I can also see some criticism. I'll try to accommodate as many of them as possible. But for my handwriting, I'll try my best. Because I'm standing, right? There's a limit I can do. But I'll try to really write a little bit better. Okay. All right, so let's talk about linear versus nonlinear structures. Okay. So basically, here is the takeaway right now. Whenever you talk about linear, okay, you're basically saying you must have unique predecessor and successor. If you break this principle here, meaning that if you have non-unique predecessor or if you have non-unique successor, it's not linear anymore. That's a simple principle. But let's see example. Okay. So when we talk about nonlinear over here, that means either the predecessor is not unique, okay, or the successor is not unique. Either way, all right? Just remember that principle here, I think, and then we'll see example. Let's start with the 3 data structure we know pretty well so far, right? So we have array over here. We have singly linked list, and also we got doubly linked list. All of these 3 are linear data structure, simply because we have only unique predecessor and successor. We just don't violate that principle. Let's take a look at the array. If I take, let's say, this element over here as a reference point, right, over here, so you can see that if I want to get to its predecessor, I simply go for index minus 1. Go to successor, go to index plus 1, right? Minus 1 plus 1. There's only a unique one. You don't have more than one predecessor or more than one successor. So you can think about this is the unique predecessor of index 1. And this one here is the unique successor of index 1. Right? And the same property will apply to every position. Of course, you might be thinking, what about this one here? This one here, you got a unique successor, but you simply don't have any predecessor because that'll be index minus 1. But that's fine because you're not violating the principle of uniqueness for predecessor successor. Okay, that's about the array. Very similarly for singly linked list and doubly linked list. For singly linked list, of course, you don't really have a predecessor, right? Because you directly you can actually calculate just using the next operator, right? The next reference. That's what I meant to say. So here, if I try to go here, this will be the unique successor for this particular node. If I really want to calculate the predecessor over here, I don't have a direct reference, but I can do it. You know, just take a linear time, right? So this one here will be the predecessor of Allen node. But that one there will take about big O of n time to compute. But still there, right? It just takes more time to really compute. All right, so that's about singly linked list, and doubly linked list is similar idea. If I take this one as a reference node right here, all right, and apparently you can see that if I want to go for successor, there's only one way, the next node. If I want to go for predecessor, that's another way, right here, right? The only difference is, so now for the doubly linked list, if I want to calculate a predecessor, it's just more efficient. I can go for the reference directly. I don't need a loop to find out the predecessor. So for these two, the unique predecessor and successor takes big O of 1 time to compute. Right? Because you can just go for the previous and next reference. So what's so good? Okay. So let's now talk about trees, which we haven't really seen so far. But let's get some intuition, and then I'll give you some gentle introduction about the terminology for trees. Okay. So this will be a tree. We kind of, well, in real life, it should be like an upside down. You kind of grow the tree like this, right? You kind of go for the root and then go all the way up. But in computer science, in programming, it's kind of the other way, right? You got to get used to it. We say that the top node over here, which will be a unique top node, is called the root of the tree. All right, so this one here is the top, but it's more common to say it's the root of the tree. There are two directions you can go. Either you can go from top to bottom, or you can go from bottom to top for each node. For example, let's say given this particular node, I can either try to go up right here. When you go up, we are saying you're going to your predecessor or parents. So this will be the predecessor or the parents. I think calling parents is more common because we try to kind of bring in the analogy from family tree, you know, in real life. But predecessor is okay. We understand what you're saying. On the other hand, if you try to go down, you can see from this node here, you can either go down over here or you can go down over here. So these two nodes are so-called the successors or children of that particular node. Okay, this will be, this will be the successor or children. Successor or children. And we can immediately tell the tree is not linear because even though the predecessor is always unique, let's say if you choose this node here, if you want to go up, there's only one path for you to go. But given any node, if you want to go down, it's very often there are multiple ways you can go down. So that means successors are multiple, they are not unique. So this one breaks the uniqueness property for successor. So that's why tree in general cannot be linear. It's non-linear. In 3101, which I just want to mention, in 3101, we're going to emphasize more about another data structure called graph. And the graph is going to be even more general. For successor, like trees, it's going to be multiple. For predecessor, unlike trees, graph will have, in general, multiple predecessors as well. All right? So let's now just kind of summarize what we have talked about, right? I think that will be more useful when you actually want to review this part for study. Okay? Let's try to build a table right here. Okay, so let's now put down all the data structure we have seen so far. Okay, we got singly linked list. And let's start with the array. How about that? Array. And then we got singly linked list. And also we got doubly linked list. And then we got tree. And let's also put graph over here, all right? We wouldn't really go any deeper about what a graph is, but it's good for you to know about graph, just at the comparison level, all right? For each one of them, let's now consider their predecessor and successor, either unique or multiple, okay? So when we talk about predecessor and also successor, basically for all these array, singly linked list, all the way to tree, the predecessor will just be unique, right? That's something we just said. They'll all be unique. Okay, let me just put unique right here. They will all be unique. And what about successor, right? For array, singly linked list, and doubly linked list, right here. Because there's always a unique successor, as we said earlier, right? It's always unique. So for this part here, it's going to be unique. This part here. Okay. Oh, sorry. All the way to doubly linked list. Right here. All right. So this part here, it would be unique. Let me just make it better. Okay. So this part here is going to be unique. And this is exactly why all these three are the linear data structure. All right. What about the tree and graph? For tree and graph, their successor will simply be multiple. Especially for trees, you can see from here, you can just got multiple successor. Okay. So let me just clean it up right here. So what I will do is, let's now try to do right here. Okay, so for tree and graph, their successor will just be multiple. And for the graph, it's going to be most general form. Both the predecessor and successor will just be multiple. Okay. Multiple. And also multiple. So these two are the so-called nonlinear data structure. Okay. It's good to clarify about what linear versus nonlinear data structures are before we actually dive into it. Any questions? So how should you prepare this part for the exam, right? Or written test, right? A very reasonable direction would be you want to know from the definition level what does it really mean to be linear and what does it really mean to be nonlinear. And if I give you a particular data structure, I say, okay, let's give it a doubly linked list. Why is it linear? In that case, how can you justify? Right? You want to make sure you kind of practice about expressing your ideas in written form because that's required for the exam. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay, so after this, we are going to go over a series of definitions for general tree, right? That's a very important task for today. We want to go over many important concepts. Okay. And if you go back to the slides, basically the last bullet point here. So the tree ADT, so the idea is borrowed from the family trees. So if you ever see a family tree, you will pretty much know what exactly it is, right? So I'm going to go over things like root, parents, children, siblings, and also ancestor, descendants. So these are the most important terms we're going to go over. We will use examples as well. Okay, let's start from that. Okay. Let's start with the first set of terms. And we're going to use this more like a family tree over here, right? Just with names over here. I think that might be the most intuitive way to really pick up. But I think in the assignment or in the programming test or even in the test, normally you might just see symbolic names like A, B, C, D, E, etc. But it should be the same, right? But now let's make it more intuitive for you to pick up the ideas. All right, so top element of the tree, straightforward, is called the root. Okay, I'll switch the iPad in just one moment. Let's go over definition first. And then we talk about also ideas about parents and also ideas about children. The important concept is parents and children are not really general concepts, just about things immediately above you will immediately below you, like a predecessor and successor, basically. Right? So let's see the example. Okay. So let's start with the root right here. The root, you simply look for the top elements. The root for the tree, for each tree, is simply unique. There's only one root. This will be the unique root of the tree. There's another important property for the root. Every node other than the root has a parent. For example, you can see that Ernesto has the parents David, and also Elsa has the parents Chris, and etc. But David, being the root, has no parents by definition, because somehow the tree is a finite data structure. You want to make sure the parent reference will somehow get undefined at some point, so you don't really get unlimited like links in the tree. Right? So this one here, this is the only node that has, so let's put a more programming term, null. If you say a particular node has no parents defined, you simply assign null, like a node objects is being pointed to. Null parents. All right. Okay, that's good for the root for now. And then let's talk about parents and children. Okay. So for parents, you can think about for every node, the parent is more like a predecessor, or you're simply going upward. There's always unique. Okay. So why don't we say we pick Ernesto right here? So you can think about this one here. The parents is going this way, upwards. Okay? So here you would say David is the parents of Ernesto. Okay, let's do one more. Or you can say Shirley, if you go upwards, is going to go to Elsa. So you would say Elsa is parents of Shirley. Immediately above, you don't go more than one link to go to your parents. There's always a unique predecessor or parents for each node. And children will be the symmetric concept. All right, children here will be all the nodes immediately below you. For example, let's say we take Chris over here. And for children, it's more like a successor, and you simply go downwards to collect all your children. All right. So let's say if you choose a quiz right there, if you go downwards, you can either go this way or you can go this way. Okay. So we say that these two nodes are the children. The children of quiz. Here you can see that we got one child and two child, first child and second child. If it is the case that every node in the tree has either one child, let me say it again. If it is the case that for every node in the tree, you always got this kind of layout, like up to two children for every node. It's called a binary tree. But we'll define that more precisely, maybe on Tuesday next time. But I do want to give you some general idea. But in this case, it's not binary tree. Because let's say for this node here, how many children does it have? 3, right? 1, 2, and 3. So that one tells you that it's a general tree, it's not binary. Right? So let's go for another example here. So these 3 nodes right here are said to be the children of Elsa. All right? So that's okay? Okay, parents, children, and root. One more concept there called siblings. Also makes sense. For nodes that has the same parents, they're called siblings. Right? So given that 1, 2, and 3 are children of the same parents, Elsa, so that means Shirley and Vanessa and Peter, they are siblings. Similarly, Ernesto and Chris, they are also siblings. All right, one more thing I want to point out. You will see that the root over there is so special, such that the node has no parents. But we can talk about symmetric way. Are there any nodes that have no children? There are, right? Can you give me one example of a node that has no children? Yes? Ernesto, I agree, absolutely. You can see this Ernesto here. Okay, that's good. Can you tell me how many nodes are there that has no children in this tree? 4? 5. Maybe you miscounted a little bit, right? So you can see Ernesto here, Anna, Shirley, Vanessa, and Peter, right? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. I'll point this out first because they have a special name, okay, which we'll get to. Think about Ernesto here, and also Shirley, and Vanessa, and also Peter, and also Anna. So these are the nodes. So all these, okay, let me just say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. These are the nodes with no children, with no child. Okay. Okay, I think that's good. All right, the next one. Let's now try to generalize the ideas about parents and children into ancestor and descendants. Okay. So if you go back to the slides right here, so what we have is, okay, so definition for ancestor. Guys, very important. All right, you can see that according to definition, it's going to include the node itself. All right, so the node itself, parents, grandparents, all the way to the root will be the ancestor. Okay, we'll see example. Symmetrically, the descendants will be the node itself, children, grandchildren, all the way down to the bottom of the tree. Right, so that'll be ancestor and descendants. So the immediate observation is a node is actually its ancestor and descendant at the same time. It's just our definition. We'll follow the same kind of definition that's standard when we talk about graph traversal as well in 3101, but you don't need to worry for now. Okay, just notice that it's like a standard definition. Okay, let's get there. Okay, so first of all, let's now just write down this important observation about ancestor and descendants. Okay, okay, I'll put it here. A node is both its ancestor and descendants. Whenever I kind of ask you about, for example, what will be the list of ancestor or list of descendants for a node, always start with the node itself before you compute any further. Okay. All right, let's now see example here. Okay. So what we do is, why don't we do the following? Okay, let's pick 3 nodes over here, and that will work out their ancestor and descendants. Okay, one moment. Let me pick, let's say, Vanessa, and also Elsa, and David. Somehow you can see that Vanessa happened to be the bottom, and David happened to be at the top. So you can see, how the ancestor and descendant will actually evolve, differently. Okay. So we're gonna look at ancestor and descendants. And also descendants. All right. Now, let's look at maybe Elsa here. Elsa is not as extreme. Why don't we start with Elsa? Okay. What would be Elsa's ancestor? Give me the complete list, please.
Elsa, person
Elsa, Chris, and David? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Remember, you got to include Elsa, it's herself, right? So this one here is going to be Elsa, Chris, and also David. Okay, let's focus on this path specifically. Okay, so we say that we got Elsa over here, and then we got Chris, and we got David, all the way to the root, basically. This sequence of nodes, starting from the node itself all the way up to the root, has a special name. It's called ancestor path. That's something you will also need to know very well. We're going to use the idea about ancestor path when we actually try to perform some operations later on a heap or other data structure, other tree variants. Okay, I'm going to write it down right here. Okay, so this one here is about Elsa, followed by Chris, followed by David. This is what we call the ancestor path of Elsa. Basically, starting from Elsa, go all the way to David. Another subtle thing, maybe for now, but it's also very important when we talk about mathematical property later. You can see that for this particular path, we got Elsa, Chris, and also David. We got 3 nodes over there. However, we got 1 and 2 links to really get to that particular top. So that means every time you talk about a particular path, the number of nodes minus 1 will correspond to how many links it will take to go from the beginning until the end of the node. Right? I'm going to write it down. It's a very important observation that we're going to use very often. Okay? Okay, if you look at over here, so 3 nodes, but you got 2 links or edges. So edge number 1 and edge number 2. All right? But in general, if you got a path with maybe 10 nodes, how many links do you have? 10 minus 1, 9. Okay? It's a very important property, which we're going to see later. Okay? All right, and then descendants. Okay, I'm not going to bother you. Okay, let's say Elsa here. Basically, all the Elsa herself, all the way down to the children, grandchildren, right? So we only kind of cover Elsa, Shirley, Vanessa, and Peter, right? So that one there is going to be Elsa, Shirley, Vanessa, and Peter. Okay. Okay, that's good. So now, Vanessa, right? Ancestor will be Vanessa, Elsa, Chris, David. Let's just fill it out. It's going to be Vanessa, Elsa, Chris, and David. And what about descendants for Vanessa? That's actually a special case. When you actually have a node with no children, would the descendants be empty or not empty?
Not empty.
Not empty. Yeah, exactly. Right. Just go for the definition, right? That sounds like a common misconception from your fellow student from the previous term. All right, would be just Vanessa herself. All right. Similarly, when we talk about, let's say, for David being the root, the ancestor would be just David himself, right? There's no further parents. And for descendants, this is also important. When you talk about the descendants of the root, it's going to cover all the nodes in the tree. All right. It's going to cover all the nodes in the tree. And also notice about the extreme case here and also here. Okay. All right, so we cover ancestor path, and descendants. Any questions? We're good? Okay, good. I'll just say one more thing, okay? And then we can take a short break. So whenever we talk about ancestor path, the ending node here must be the root. Okay? All right, why don't we take a short break and then we'll continue. Okay. And all right, let's now continue with the terminology for the trees. So we're done with the ancestor descendants and also, ancestor descendants, right? Let's now sibling as well, right? We did it earlier. Let's talk about a very important concept called subtree. All right, this is arguably the most important concept because tree themselves are recursive data structure, which I will explain a little bit more next Tuesday. But whenever you want to do recursion on the trees, you have to rely on the concept of subtree. Okay, well, we'll talk about it. Okay. Definition is very, very simple. Whenever you want to define a subtree, the first question is, what's the root of the subtree? Once you identify the root of the subtree itself will be all the descendants for the root. Okay, that's the definition. But let's see that visually. Okay, we're gonna start from the definition and then we'll do some little exercises together just to give you more intuition. Okay, let's say this is the tree, right? First of all, a single tree contains multiple subtrees. Let's now write down the observation right away. Okay, a single tree may contain more than one or multiple. Whenever I say multiple, I really meant more than one. Okay, more than one. More than one, of course, make it even more precise, larger than one. Subtrees. Okay. Okay, that's a very important principle to remember. Okay, so now for this particular tree, every time you want to somehow numerate stuff systematically, think about extreme cases. So now in this case, let's think about what's the smallest subtree and what would be the largest subtree. All right, smallest subtree. Okay, I'll just go directly since this concept might be new to you. All right, smallest subtree will be right here. Think about this one here will be a subtree itself. So this is a subtree whose root is Peter. And the descendant for the subtree will just be Peter itself, himself. All right. And this will be another subtree that contains only one node, which will be Vanessa. This will be another subtree with one node. Okay. This will be another subtree. And this will be another one. All right. So all these will be the smallest subtrees of size 1, meaning that the tree contains the root, only the root itself. Only the root. All right. So these are the smallest subtrees. Symmetrically, what would be the biggest subtree? It should be the subtree. Yeah, exactly, the whole thing. Yeah, exactly right. So that will be the subtree rooted at the actual root of the tree. All right. By the way, whenever I try to draw a tree, I just use triangle. Right. That's usually the shape. Right. All right. For that, let's now do this one here. Okay. Let me use this one here. Okay, David, the root, including all the descendants of David. So that'll be the largest subtree. So this will be the largest subtree. The root being the actual root of the whole tree. So these are the two extreme cases. To really enumerate all the subtree, we'll do something similar in a moment. There might be somewhere in between as well. For example, you can see, I'll give you one more example. For example, it could be, let's say, this will be a intermediate subtree that's rooted at Elsa, right? Over here. So for this one here, this will be a subtree rooted at Elsa. Okay? What's the size of this subtree? 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that'll be the size, right? You gotta make sure you count every node in the tree, including the root. Size 4. All right, let's start with that. Any questions about subtree? All right. That's the first part. And then let's now move on to think about some problem, all right? Right here. Let's say here, the problem goes like that. We don't need to program, but I think the idea, algorithmic thinking, is going to kind of make you get more comfortable so you can program later in Java, right? So whenever you want to perform some operation, either to change something or calculate something on the tree, most likely you have to think of it recursively, most likely, okay? Whenever you want to do things recursively on the tree, you have to think about, if I do something to the current root, what should I do recursively to each of the subtree rooted at one of its children? Okay, that's something we'll see. So the problem is, given a particular node n, for example, let's say n here is the root David. And we want to compute the size of the subtree rooted at n. So here, what's the size of the subtree rooted at n? Of course, you can simply count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That might be fine if you're given a diagram. But let's say you're only given some node to start with. You don't have anything else. In that way, you have to compute recursively. Let's try to walk through that process intuitively for now. All right. So let's say we are trying to define a method or like a function. Okay. So what we have is, let's say we have a method called count, which is going to return some integer, right? And then for now, I'll just say maybe you're just passing some node, n, right? So for example, if I say I want to count David, eventually it should return 8, eventually. But we're going to see exactly how this can be done recursively, right? Okay. Let's start by calling the count at the top level. So what we do is we're going to say count David. Pretty much like the principle we spoke about in the beginning of the semester. If you're trying to do something recursively, if the input is way too large, you just cannot handle right away. In that case, you have to somehow delegate the jobs. In the case of the array, we have to delegate to maybe the rest of the array by having some like a from and to indices. We do something a little bit similar, but now we're going to say David, underneath it, this part over here is way too large for us to compute right away. So we're going to delegate to different subtree. How many subtrees do we have underneath David? That's an important question here. Let me rephrase the question. Currently, we know that all the nodes underneath David is too many for us to compute right away. So what we do instead is to figure out how many subtrees there are underneath David. And we're going to call recursively the count on each subtree. And once we get a result from each recursive call, add them up together, and we get a result. So now here's a critical question. How many subtrees do we have underneath David? Any idea? You think about 8. David's here. And think about from David here, we can either go up for predecessor, but it's not going to help, or we can go downwards for successor. We can either go for this way here or this way, because we got 2 children. All right? So that means over here, this would be the first subtree rooted at the first child of David. And over here, this would be the second subtree rooted at the second child of David. I'll write it down. All right. This will be the first subtree rooted at David's first child. And this blue one here will be the second subtree that we have to worry about. Rooted at David's second child. So that would mean we have to make 2 recursive calls. All right? The first recursive call, just remember, we started with this. We want to count for David, but now it cannot be completed just yet. What we should do is, we should now, first of all, we try to call recursively the count on Ernesto. Okay, E for Ernesto. And also, we need to count for Chris. Okay, Chris. So accordingly, we have this recursive call and this recursive call as well. All right? We're going to handle them from left to right individually, right? What's going to happen when we want to count for Ernesto? That one doesn't seem to be too complicated, right? There's only one node. You can think about when we reach Ernesto, there's no further child from Ernesto. So we know that this is a base case. If that's a base case, we just return 1. Because for that particular subtree, the size is 1. Right? So right here, this will be a base case. Return 1. Okay, return 1. What about the second recursive call? The second recursive call here, Chris is right here. Underneath it, still too many for us to handle right away. So you're going to make some further recursive call, right? So what we do is, you can see there's one subtree right here. There's another subtree right here, right? So we're going to make another 2 separate recursive call. Okay, let's do it. Okay. So that one there, we're going to basically go for this particular subtree and also this particular subtree right here. Okay. The orange one is going to correspond to, we want to count for Elsa. Okay. And the purple one is going to be counting for Anna. Right? But you can see that this one here, pretty much like an Ernesto case, returning 1. Right? So that one there is just another base case. And that one there is going to return 1. All right, we're getting there. Okay. And when we try to handle this recursive call, count Elsa, can we handle it right away? Not really, right? Because it's not, well, think about the base case is only when you are handling a node with no further child. So Elsa here, no. So we're going to make 3 separate recursive call before we can decide what's the size for Elsa's subtree. All right. So let's do one more time. So what we do is, we do this one here, Shirley, and also Vanessa, and also Peter, right? So I'm going to write it down here. So this one will be the count for Shirley. This will be counting for Vanessa. And this will be counting for Peter. Basically, you can think about, right now, we actually got all the answer we'll need because now we have reached to the bottom level also for Shirley, Vanessa, and Peter, right? So this one here is going to return 1. This one here is going to return 1. And this one here is also going to return 1. Okay, let's highlight it. The way I'm tracing it is really like building the recursion tree that we talked about, right? In the previous example, like a split array. That's exactly how we kind of expanded a recursion tree. Okay. So now, as far as Elsa count is concerned, because we know this subtree here has size 1, this subtree here has size 1, this subtree here has size 1 as well. So now, what should we return for counting Elsa? That's a critical question. Should we return 1 plus 1 plus 1 only?
You would, like I see it as like you have a sum, you would add 1 once, and then you would make.
Why would you add 1?
Elsa is.
Yeah, exactly. So the root itself should be included in the descendants, right? Good, exactly right. Okay. So for every root over here, we delegate to 3 separate recursive calls. Once we get a return value from each one of them, sum them up. 1 plus 1 plus 1. And then plus the node itself. All right. Good, very good. So now this one here is going to return 1 plus 1 plus 1, and then plus 1. That final plus 1 there is really for the Elsa herself. All right? So it's going to be 4. So 4 here means for this particular subtree, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 elements there, 4 nodes. All right? And now we can go back, quiz. So quiz over here, count Elsa already returned 4. Count Anna returns 1. What should we return for quiz? 4 plus 1 plus 1, right? So that one there. So for quiz, you're going to return 4 plus 1 and then plus 1. So again, the final plus 1 there is include quiz himself. So that will be 6. So the 6 over here means we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But more precisely, 1 plus 4 plus 1. All right. And finally, we got David here. We kind of go bottom up, when we unfold, the recursion. So now David here is going to be 1 here plus 6 over here plus 1, 8. Okay, so that'll be the final outcome over here. So it's going to return 1 plus 6 and then plus 1, including David himself. So that would be 8. So this will be the final outcome. Right? Try to really get used to this kind of a recursive tracing on the tree. For most of the method you're going to implement or to analyze, you're going to follow a very similar format. You just got to know whenever you're reaching any case that's not base case, you have to delegate to subtrees. For each subtree, make a recursive call on the root of the subtree. All right, so that's the main insight. All right. Guys, any questions about this? All right. Of course, if you look at the diagram directly, it's kind of messy, I agree. But you're going to really see how the build-up has been done. I think that's the main thing for you to understand. All right? Let me write down one more observation, okay? And then we'll move on to another concept, okay? So subtrees are the subproblems for you as a programmer to make recursive calls on. Okay, so subtrees represent subproblems, and then you got to make sure you make a recursive call on each one of them, and then combine the result. Okay. Right, really study this example more carefully, hopefully before Tuesday, right? So once we get to the more advanced recursion problem, you'll make more sense to you, all right? All right, let's now move on to one more example about subtrees, okay? Give me one moment. Yep, there. Right here. All right, so for this one here, how many subtrees are there in total? How many? I'm not asking about the size of the subtree. I'm asking about how many subtrees do we have? A hint for you, whenever you are seeing problems like this, which you don't really have like an immediate clue, that's okay. But think about definition. So in this case, you want to recall yourself, what's the definition of a subtree? What do you really need in order to form a subtree? You need a root. So when I ask about how many subtrees are there in total, I'm basically asking about how many possible nodes that can serve as the subtree roots. We're asking, the two questions are really the same. Yeah, go ahead. 8, because you just count how many nodes there are in the tree, right? Exactly, all right. All right, okay, for this one here, I'm going to elaborate a little bit further, right, just to emphasize that concept. It's so important, okay? So your fellow student is actually right. So 8 in total, simply because we got 8 nodes in the tree. Each node can just be the root of some subtree. total number of nodes in the tree. Each node can be the root of a subtree. Okay, and let's now try to enumerate them very quickly. Okay, and then I also need you to help me out. Okay, we know that there are 8 of them. However, not necessarily all the 8 subtrees have the unified like a size. They might be of different sizes. All right. I'll help you out so you can see what I'm trying to do here. Size of the subtree, and also number of subtrees of that particular size. Okay, I'll give you one example. Let's start from the smallest to the largest. Okay, the smallest size would be just 1. And we said earlier, how many subtrees do we have with size 1? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right? And since we got 8 in total, we got 3 more subtrees to identify. Pretty good. So we need to resolve quite a big number of them, right? Let's go another one together. If I go for the largest size, it would be the entire tree, right? It would be exactly this particular subtree. That's the biggest one. And there's only one subtree, right? This one is the root will just be David. Now, the question for you, you can take a moment to think about. How many more rows should I put in between? I heard 2 over here. Okay, anybody else? Do you guys agree? Should be 2? Give me 1. 6. Okay. How many?
1.
Just 1. Which one?
Chris.
Chris, yeah, exactly. Okay. You can think about this particular subtree over here has the size 6. The root will be Chris. We got one more. Anyone? Now we got size 5. Sorry, we got size 1, size 6, size 8. We got one more. Go ahead. Sorry, you said something? 4. Yes, I agree. So which root? Elsa. Yes, yeah, thank you. I agree. Yes, thank you. So let's put it. Yeah, these are basic. I can definitely see that, but they are important, right? So this will be the size 4. And then only 1, okay? Where the root is Elsa. All right, good. Okay, let's now talk about. Okay, I'll just focus on iPad now. So just to give you just a little bit faster, okay? And this one here, just about notes, either with some children or with no children. We have some special names for them, okay? First of all, let's start with so-called external notes. External notes are basically the notes with no children. So we got Ernesto over here, and also Shirley, and also Vanessa, and also Peter, and Anna. So these are the 5 external notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. External notes with no children. Any node that's not external will be internal. Similarly, any node that's not internal will be external, right? All right, and then let's now mark it down, and I'll give you one more insight, okay? For example, David, you can see it has two children. Chris has 2 children. And Elsa has 3 children, at least 1. Oh, sorry. 1, 2, and 3. They are called internal nodes. At least one child. Larger than or equal to 1 child. All right. And the reason we want to distinguish between these two categories is because every time you are actually doing, again, you're doing defining some operation, let's say in Java on trees. If the current node you are encountering is already external node, that basically says you are now encountering the base cases. That means you can return. Pretty much like how we count, right? External nodes will be base cases. On the other hand, if my current node is not external, that means I have to explore subtrees recursively, individually. Okay? So that one there, internal nodes will be recursive cases. Okay? Also very important to note. Okay? All right, let's now move on. Okay, we got more things to define. We'll see how much we can cover. Okay, we're on track. Okay, so this will be easy, just about edge and also path. Okay, I'll give you one example path again, right? So let's say, for example, let's say we go from Peter to Elsa, Elsa to Chris, and also Chris to David, right? So each parent link, so let's say if you go from Peter to Elsa, it's called an edge. And when you have a sequence of nodes, like a Peter followed by Elsa, followed by Chris, followed by David, it will be a path. Okay? So we have Peter, followed by Elsa, followed by Chris, followed by David. All right? Again, I'm going to repeat again the observation we had. In this particular path, you have 4 nodes. So, accordingly, you got exactly 4 minus 1 links or edges that's involved. So to count the number of edges will be very important once we go to the next concept, which is about the depth of certain nodes. We'll get there. Okay? So, or you can think about right here, to go from Peter to Elsa, Elsa to Chris, and Chris to David, right? You got exactly 3 links, exactly the number of nodes minus 1. Right? Any question about edge and path? Straightforward. All right. Now here comes the critical point. We have to define 2 concepts right now: depth versus height. Okay. You can also look at the definition on the slides, but let me just repeat it so you can take some notes. All right, so these 2, depth and heights. The targets for computing these 2 values are very important. For one of them, the target is a single node. For the other one, the target is the entire tree. Right? It's very different. Right? Let me write it down. So whenever you talk about the depth, okay, right here, it would be with respect to some chosen node. Depth of a node. And it will be the number of edges or parent link from the node n to the root. For example, Vanessa over here will say that the depth will be 1, 2, and 3. The depth for Anna over here will be 1 less because we got 1 and 2. All right, and then Chris over here, for example, the depth will be just 1 link. And you can also define for the root as well, the depth over here will just be 0. There's no link. But basically, think about it, it takes no effort to travel from David to himself. So that'll be 0. So whenever we talk about depth, it's simply about individual node. Accordingly, we can now try to group all the nodes with the same depth into a particular category we call level. Okay? So now the tree here, you can think about like this. We say that, okay, let me divide them. So now I can say that level 0, level 1, level 2, and also level 3. Level 3 contains all the nodes whose depth is simply 3. For example, Shirley here, you also got 1, 2, and 3. Vanessa, you got 1, 2, and 3. Peter, you got 1, 2, and 3, right? And etc. And all the nodes with depth 0 contains only the root, unique. And there are 2 nodes over here with depth 1, and etc. All right? This idea about depth and also level will actually give us some very nice mathematical property when we talk about binary tree. Just keep that in mind. Okay? That's about depth. Using the depth value, we can divide all the nodes in the tree into different levels. Okay? From 0 all the way down to a certain number. Okay? That's about the depth. Let's now talk about heights. Whenever you talk about heights, it's not about a particular node, it's about a particular tree. Height of a tree. Right? Notice the difference over here. One is about a node, the other one is about a tree. Okay? Different. But it's kind of related. When I'm given a tree, how can I compute its heights? By definition, it's going to be the maximum depth. Maximum depth of the descendants of the root. All right, I'm going to give you one example very soon. Basically, when you're given a tree and you somehow want to calculate what's the height of the tree, you basically want to somehow think about what's the maximum depth you can find for all the nodes inside that tree, what the maximum value is. All right, we'll get there. Let's do some example. Oh, we can do it right away, right here. Okay. Let's now try to make some comparison here. Okay, let's see what the problem is. There are 2 problems here. They are both to calculate the heights of a tree. The first tree is about a tree rooted at David. Okay, let me highlight it. So now, if you want to calculate the heights of this particular tree, versus this one here, we're trying to calculate the height of the tree rooted at Elsa. That one there is going to be this tree over here. So we are asking what's the height for this tree versus what's the height for this tree. Right? They're different, apparently, right? They're different trees. Even though they are drawn from the same source tree. That's kind of the entire tree. All right? By definition, it's got to be the maximum depth that we can find for this particular tree. But the best thing to do is to divide them into different levels, so corresponding to different depths. Okay, so let's try that. Okay, so now for this one here, you can see that. So this will be level 0, level 1, level 2, and then level 3. Okay, let me write it down. So this will be all the nodes with depth 0, depth 1, depth 2, and maximum right here. So we know that the heights is the depth at the bottom level. I put in crow because you can only see that when you draw the tree visually, but You want to really rely on the calculation for the depth. Go for the maximum. Okay. Okay. So that will be 3 in this case. All right, guys. Question. What about this tree here? What will be the heights? Well, think about in this tree here, how can you divide the tree nodes into different levels? And what's the maximum level you can get to? That will be the height. 1, yeah, good. Let's see. Level 0, level 1. Give me 1 minute and then we're done. Yeah, give me 1 minute, please. Okay. So this will be the depth 0 and depth 1. And this will be the maximum. Okay. So the height will be 1. So this kind of calculation is more like an intuitive way. So you're having a global view about all the nodes. You kind of divide them into different depths just for you to see the definition. But on Tuesday next week, we're going to see how we can compute this depth and also heights recursively. So thinking will be slightly different, but more efficient. All right, thank you so much. Thursday, there's no lecture. I'll see you guys in Williams Small Center for your test. And then we'll resume the lecture next Tuesday. All right, thank you.